Okay, I think we'll probably, as it's 12 o'clock, we'll start this lunchtime learning event. Hello everyone, welcome to this lunchtime learning event on ward-led enablement. This program of work promotes reconditioning through an enablement approach on the wards. I think it really reflects the strength of collaboration within systems, recognising skills and expertise that may be held in one place, such as a reablement team in the community, and how sharing their expertise with another place, such as bringing those skills onto a ward environment, can really make a difference to patient outcome and experience, and also team experience and satisfaction. I am going to hand over now to Debbie Edgell, the Regional Manager for Essex Cares, and Josh Poole, the Transformation Lead at East Suffolk and North Essex NHS Foundation Trust. Debbie and Josh, they've already recorded a podcast on ward-led enablement that's already been uploaded on our YouTube channel, and we're really delighted that they're here today. They've agreed to share a bit more about their work in this lunchtime learning event. Just a point, the learning event is being recorded. There will be time for questions at the end. And now I'm going to hand over to Josh and Debbie.
Well, thank you, Emily, for a fantastic introduction. I think it's better than what Debbie and I had practiced, to be honest, wasn't it? So, yeah, my name's Josh. I'm a transformation lead, but I'm also a physio by trade, and I like to sort of always emphasise that as part of my role and how I'm helping to support change here at ESNEFT. I'm very kindly supported by a wonderful colleague of mine, Debbie, who's also helped us to set up this initiative here. So, Debbie, I'll hand over to you for an introduction.
Hello everyone, I'm Debbie Edgell. I'm a Regional Business Manager for Essex Cares Limited. We are owned by Council and I operate across North East Essex. I operate the Community Reablement Service. So we often support individuals that have had an acute episode, a hospital stay, to support them to come home and learn how to live independently once more in their own homes. And I'm also one of the co-designers of the Ward-led Enablement Programme, which is what we're here to talk about today. Hang on, my slide didn't click. So we want to explain all about our programme, and we thought we'd take it right back to the very beginning. How did it actually start? So it actually started with one simple conversation. In 2019, a service manager from Essex County Council was walking on the wards, and a lady asked him for a little bit of help. She didn't know what day it was, what time of day it was. She had no structure to her day, and she'd felt herself going backwards. One of the things that this service manager thought during this conversation was, is there anything in the system, across system partners, that we could actually do differently?
And it's quite interesting, really, and Brian has been very happy for us to share this video, and I hope all of you have had the chance to see it. But this really does encapsulate exactly what the Ward-led Enablement Programme of work was aiming to do. So we'll let the video play. We do apologise, it might be a little bit pixelated, however, but we will share the link within the slides or within the chat for you to look at another time if you can't see it now. I think we can all agree here that this video in itself is very powerful and something we see day to day. I've already been fortunate to use this in a couple of training sessions in the past week alone, and it has provoked certainly some very good conversations. But I'm going to hand back over to Debbie, and we're going to really sort of kick off this event.
So following that conversation with the social care manager on the wards, he came back and asked some questions within Essex County Council itself, ESNEFT as the acute hospital in Colchester, us at ECL as the community reablement provider, and he asked all of us, what could we do differently? We looked at partnership. Was it possible? Was it possible to build that bridge, the gap between when a person is at home, I'm here living my life, I go into hospital for being unwell, and then I go home again? Can we bridge the gap between the two places of residence that individual faces? And how could the community services potentially support the adult whilst they are a resident within the hospital?
But the partnership on this concept was, what if it looked like if reablement started sooner? And when we take this in a little bit more of a wider context, and a lot of us from nursing or therapy background who work on wards such as surgical wards or orthopedics, that enhanced recovery protocol. Now, what would that look like in a potential reablement model? So could this start when the patient was still in hospital? So we drew up a concept idea, looked at the governance needed to test the theory to see if this could potentially happen.
So the concept, we looked at very simple metrics to test a theory, to learn from a pilot. So we wanted to see, could we help to reduce the hospital associated deconditioning that happens as an elderly frail person is in the wards? We wanted to see if, using the community reablement ethos that we have established over many, many years, whether we could use that same ethos in a hospital setting and look at doing the right task in the right room for an individual who does it in the right room and the right task at home. The test and learn pilot itself, we actually looked for some funding opportunities, and we were successful in getting 6 months of funding to start in 2020. And we were able to, through the partnership, look at going on 2 wards within Colchester Hospital as a test and learn, see if it would work.
And what we found, again, this is also on reflection from when this happened previously to the model that we've establishing this current point in time, is that there was, a great level of insight and learning taken from this. It was a very innovative new practice, something that never really been done before. So again, we were evolving with that journey, as it were, and still, when looking back, think there was a lot more that we could have potentially looked at, but given at that point in time, we managed to take a lot of rich learning from it. And it was a total of 166 patients that went through this pilot program. 90% of patients either maintained or improved their level of mobility and independence, and that broken down was 49% increased their mobility and independence, whilst 41% prevented deconditioning. And how we looked at that again was based on their level of mobility, such as in hospital and then when they're at home again. Looking at specific discharge outcomes, and what I'd like to just pause at this point in time is take into account, we did start this program at work, not saying at the best time during healthcare when it was the peak of COVID, but again, conversely, that does give us that real time, ecological understanding of what was going on in the healthcare system. But we still managed to look at getting at least 29% of patients were home fully self-caring, 21% were home with reablement, and 21% home with care. Now, again, looking at that in comparison to the more updated pathways of discharge, there was a reduction there clearly in pathway 2. Now, and this was also then compared to the same period previous years, as we do, looking at those seasonal variations. And there was 22% more discharges during that period, despite the breaks in play that unfortunately we had through this program of work as a result of changes to COVID and infection control. And then 31% reduction of overall ward length of stay. So in a very basic sense, we proved the concept to a level, but unfortunately this was no longer extended past that 6-month pilot program again, as of it was a very testing time during COVID and the way the funding streams were being allocated at that point in time. But the foundation learning was there.
So what happened beyond that? We did 6 months of a program, we evaluated it, and obviously COVID hit the world. So in 2021, the same question from 2019 started to be asked again: what could be done differently? So this time, ESNEFT and ourselves at ECL, we revisited that evaluation. We had a look at would the model work again? What did the data actually tell us from that evaluation of that 6-month period? But also, what had been the impact into the ward's length of stay and also the outcomes on patient journeys since the pilot had ended? We looked at further data into looking to see if actually with the initiatives and many programs going on in that time around end PJ paralysis movement, whether this was something that perhaps we could revamp, look at again, reinstate. So the benefits of no, carry on, Josh.
No, I was going to say that at this point that, you know, we tore it apart. We wanted to be very critical here. We wanted to make sure our data was validated to a level that could, you know, prove the concept. We wanted to make sure that we were covering as much as we physically could do. So therefore, the benefits were clear to see. The Alliance reserved the funds for 12-month programme to restart in Colchester Hospital. And again, like I say, we were very fortunate to start the programme again in October 2022 on one ward in Colchester.
So with this piece of work, we set up a service specification. We actually looked at it across what could we measure? How could we look to see if this programme was going to be a success for this 12-month pilot moving forward into the future of the phase 2 of ward-led enablement? So what did we design? We designed an early reopenment model, but to be done in the acute environment. It was to use the reopenment ethos of having adults do as much for themselves as they can, as they do in the community, but in the hospital setting. It was also to support a culture for the staff and the patients to actually empower them and enable them to do as much of themselves across the whole ward. We were looking at patients being up and dressed, being in their own clothes, sitting out in chairs, going to bathrooms instead of using bedside equipment, eating meals while sitting in a chair and at a table if it is possible, but also the simple thing of keeping moving, arms, legs, even when sitting in a chair or in a bed. The attitude of going home, the thought process of going home, increasing confidence to go home, looking to see if this does increase patient flow, if it does support improved discharge outcomes for individuals and reduce length of stay. So overall, the aim was to help prevent hospital-associated deconditioning.
Now, the first 3 months were quite powerful and quite exciting as well to look at as a trajectory, and also heading into those dreaded, in closing brackets, winter periods where we know things really do pick up for us as a health and social care system. Now, what we found was that ward length of stay reduced by 3 days, which equated to 40% reduction of the patient's full length of stay, the lowest October to December for 3 years. Now, what nationally the NHS reports on also includes mortality rate within the length of stay data on the wards. So we actually extracted the mortality element of it because evidently we want to make sure our patients are going home, you know, and improving their outcomes. So again, this is another way of how we're being very critical with the data that we're looking at. The success of the service attracted interest from other NHS trusts around Essex. So fortunately, having a reopenment service like we do, such as ECL in Essex, word spreads and comes out. And we are quite a close region, as we know all too well, between each trust. So the 4 other hospitals decided to pilot the programme, albeit some slight different ways. But again, this adds to more experimental learning, which we do reflect upon quite frequently and understand what challenges our barriers are, but also what's going well between these different services. So that was based then in Mid, South and West Essex. And in February 2023, based on the success and the improvements that we were demonstrating, Colchester Hospital extended the programme to a second ward.
But what about the patient? So every patient that went through the ward-led enablement programme and came home with a community reablement service, we have been fortunate to be able to track their progress and to look to see if having that early intervention model of reablement on a hospital acute ward was beneficial to them. So I'd like to introduce you to Roy. Roy was one of our very first customers who went through the reablement service after having had a ward-led enablement programme. We started in October 2022, and he was one of the first individuals we supported on the ward. He'd been in hospital for many, many weeks, building up to that programme of work starting. And I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let Roy tell you his story. Just go find the video. Hold on. ECL services across North Essex. Enablement is an ethos of supporting individuals to do as much for themselves as they can following a hospital stay or a fall or a breakdown in care or relationship at home, to support individuals to be able to regain their skills to look after themselves as much as they can.
The adverse effects of spending a significant amount of time in bed, as we know, is quite detrimental on our functional ability. So therefore, having the team to support us, enable our patients more so, will hopefully help improve their outcomes when they get discharged home.
We completed a 6-month pilot with ECIST at their Colchester Hospital site, where we brought the reablement ethos into the wards. We were enabling people with our reablement workers to get up and out of bed, to get dressed, to sit in the chair rather than remain in bed, have their meals whilst they were sat up, to actually walk up and down the wards and enable the people to think about, I've got to do this for myself when I get home, encouraging the thoughts of going home and how I'm going to cope. This programme was a success. Within the first 3 months, we saw massive improvements of people being up and out of bed and enabling individuals to be going home more independently with less reliance on the social care system. We have reduced the length of stay in that first 3 months by 3 days, which was a 42% improvement compared to before we started the programme.
They're working closely alongside our healthcare assistants, our nurses and our therapy teams to help enable patients from early in the morning throughout the whole day.
The first few months' success enabled conversations for us to look for a second ward within the Colchester ECIST site. So we are now on the Birch ward and the Darcy ward within Colchester Hospital. Following these conversations, other NHS trusts also wanted to pilot the service, and they have now rolled out initial pilots in Broomfield, Basildon and Southend hospitals.
What we've seen that the ward-led enablement team have been supporting is actually a significant increase in the percentage of our patients up and dressed on a day-to-day basis. This has overlaid into keeping their functional strength up and also improving how many patients we're discharging back to their own homes.
We met a gentleman called Roy on Birch ward. Roy was a gentleman that had been in hospital for many, many weeks, and during his stay with us, he was able to get up and start moving, enabling him to go home with the reablement service. Bringing his reablement journey up into the hospital sooner enabled his recovery to start quicker before he went home. Roy was our first gentleman that we took home from the ward enablement service during this 12-month programme, and he has been a massive success. He has progressed at home, he has been able to regain his independence, but he is actually now not reliant on the social care system at all.
All of a sudden, I was a very fit 80-year-old. I cycled 30, 40, 50 miles 3 or 4 times a week. And then within 2 weeks, my legs were funny, didn't feel right, I couldn't walk properly.
When we first met Roy, he was sitting on the side of his bed. He wasn't transferring other than bum shuffling into a wheelchair.
During the time I was there, I was slowly losing the ability to walk. After 3 or 4 weeks, I was having problems even walking with a frame.
When we first started the exercises, Roy couldn't even lift his leg.
She came in and she said, well, do you want to stand up? And I said, yeah, of course I do. So she brought my frame over and she said, let's stand you up.
So we got him up onto a frame. We got him pivot transferring into a chair to safely transfer into his wheelchair. And then Roy wanted to walk.
If it hadn't have been for the Essex girls, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know how it would have worked. I don't know who would have been there. So yeah, it was good stuff.
When the Essex Care girls came, that was a new start for Roy. Without the girls, Roy wouldn't be where he is today. They were absolutely fantastic from word go. So excellent and fantastic all round.
We really hope that other NHS trusts will be able to see the benefit of the ward-led enablement programme so that we can help more people like Roy. So as you can see, Roy being our first customer we ever took home into the reablement service, we were able to track his journey through right to the end, which was less than a 6-week length of stay, where he ended up going from being a wheelchair user to a frame user to being without any walking aid at all and no social care reliance.
Now, again, I hope Brian doesn't mind, but I pinched this slide from with pride, and this I find is a very, very powerful quote. I use a lot in my training as well. Now, what I'd like to really hone in on, and I hope that we all know who Florence Nightingale is, but it's more the date of this quote. Now, Florence Nightingale stated in one of her early pieces of literature that you should not keep no patient in hospital a day longer than is absolutely necessary, and even this might be days too long. The patient may have to recover not only from illness or injury, but from hospital itself. And I think we know that the healthcare system, we're very fortunate to be in the healthcare system, that we have the evolving system that it is, the science that we have to support our patients. But we know that conversely, sometimes that over medicalisation of our patients can also be exceptionally detrimental, that over caring. So what we want to be trying to do is, although some elements of this can be important at times, but actually, can we really take it back to the basics and what we should be doing in terms of our patients and you know, encouraging them to be as strong and active as possible whilst with us in our care. Now, length of stay. Now, this is where I'm calling out to my many health and also social care colleagues in terms of how we are trying to compile metrics or some level of framework that would establish what an early rehab model would look like. Now, length of stay, again, is one of the metrics that we do look at quite a lot. But rather than being so broad at looking at length of stay, are we breaking it down into stranded patient metrics? Now, in terms of validation of less than 7-day length of stay, if we're looking at less than 7-day length of stay, this itself is a metric for patient flow. So if we're seeing increases in less than 7-day length of stay in ward clinical areas, that in a sense will show us that there is a high flow through that ward. Now, what we've done, and based on the service specifications of this programme of work, we had a comparative ward, so a control ward. So we had the intervention wards and control wards. And what we found in comparison to the same time period last year, so September, November 23, compared to the previous year of September, November 2022, Birch and Darcy ward were significantly increasing on their less than 7 day length of stay data. So Birch being 38% higher and Darcy being 100% higher in comparison to the previous timescale last year. Our control wards saw unfortunately a reduction in as 28% in comparison to the previous year. Now, when looking at 21 day length of stay, you know, again, it's very difficult for us to formally connect the two with deconditioning, but when we consider length of stay and the detrimental effects on patient care, what we've seen, again, in comparison to the control ward and to the previous years, the intervention wards have again seen a significant reduction in a 21+ length of stay. So we can, in theory, loosely connect the two, that those two wards are certainly looking at preventing deconditioning as a result of patients being in hospital for extended periods of time.
So what about those discharges? We've actually done something throughout this programme, as we did with the pilot, which we have actively continued to learn and to look at what does the information tell us. We want to keep developing our programme and making it something that's a sustainable model for the future. So one of the pieces of development that we actually have taken from some of the learning is a pathway we've called the Rapid Reablement Discharge Pathway, which we've started in April of this year. What this does is the individuals who have gone through the ward-led enablement programme have got staff of ECL now supporting and being part of the assessment as individuals leave hospital and supporting their actual discharge process. This has helped to get the goals and the activities that the individual has done while staying in hospital, their abilities to show what they can do for themselves, added on to the assessment, which helps to line them up to the correct pathway to go home. As a result of this development, we thought we'd start looking at the pathway 0 and 1 data to see if this, again, an intervention has made a difference. So what we have compared here is the 2022 baseline was just above 50% of individuals were leaving on pathway 0 and 1 on the 2 wards that we work upon. And we wanted to see if this pathway, which started in April, made any difference. And as you can see, from April onwards, we have been able to demonstrate an improved and consistently improved picture, helping it nearly on both wards be close to 80% of individuals that are being discharged going out onto pathway 0 or 1. So thinking about length of stay, I know we don't often think of bed day stays in money terms, but something that we've looked at is the individuals that have gone through ward-led enablement against those of the same ward at the same time that didn't go through ward-led enablement, to see if there's been a reduction in their length of stay. And the exact same cohort on both wards, we've been able to reduce 2 days as an average as a length of stay. And when you look at this in a patient flow metric, it means we've actually been able to free up on Birch 72 days of additional bed day capacity, and also on Darcy for 56 days due to the size difference on the wards. And if we were to put a monetary value on this at £250 for a bed day, not only has this actually paid for the programme itself, but it's actually an additional £250,000 saving.
Now, trying to keep things simple. Now, although we want to obviously appeal to what sort of national data sets we have to make sure we're aligning our programme of work with key strategy, etc., we wanted to try and design a simple metric that could also help to identify the prevention of deconditioning as such. And based on the MPJ paralysis app and other evidence that we looked at across the country, a simple up and dressed audit would have been a great way for us to demonstrate this, to physically look at some level of functionality of our patients on a frequent basis. Now, we completed baseline audits in prior to the programme of work to try and get a key understanding of what was going on. And considering the percentage of patients up and out of bed pre-baseline was 30%, very, very low figure. Now, looking at it since February 2023, across from that point up until December 2023, on average, 60% of patients are up and dressed over the course of a week. Darcy, 75%. And what we can see and potentially allude to in theory is that the control ward, although not as high as those figures and does not have the intervention similar to that of the 2 wards mentioned, there still has been a slight increase. Now, whether we could look at potentially the effects of an audit, we understand audits are very time consuming, it's another administrative duty, but also helps to provide us with fruitful information that can help design, shape services for our areas. We could potentially argue that this cultural shift or understanding the importance of it is embedding across different areas. Now, what we also wanted to look at is not just the simple element of are they up and dressed in their own clothes, are patients remaining in bed for no identifiable reason, and what those reasons were. And again, the pre-programmed level of the amount of patients residing in bed for no reason was nearly 55%. And what again we've seen on Birch and Darcy ward is a significant decrease. So 35% on Birch, 23% on Darcy, and the control ward, again, although not drastic, there still has been a slight reduction. Now, there has been some changes within ECIST in terms of how the wards are managed and the admission criteria to certain wards, etc., which does significantly play a part. But what I'd also like to stress here is that on Birch ward, we have had a significant change of using higher levels on the CFS, so the clinical frailty scale, as an admission criteria, but we're still performing and continuing to get our patients up and out of bed. Again, so go on, Debbie. Can I bring you in, Debbie, in 1 second? Because this is the slide that me and you have both practiced on many times, haven't we? So pressure area care, as we know, again, is another key important metric under harm-free care. It's a nursing standard that we need to measure against within all ward areas. What we did with and taking Darcy as an example of this is look at the amount of reported pressure ulcers. We compared the months of February, July 2023, when ward-led enablement started on that ward, to the previous months, so prior to that, 6 months prior to that. And what we found that the previous months, on average, has 4.75 reported pressure area concerns on that ward. Specifically, as an example, looking at the different categories as well, so making sure we're really going down to that granular level of data, is that category 3, so on average, there's 4 category 3 pressure areas reported during that period. When the intervention took place on Darcy ward, that dropped down significantly to 2 per month on average, 0 being reported in April. Only 1 category 3 reported within the 6 months during that period, and 1 category 4. There was no changes in how the audit process was undertaken. It was still completed on a consistent basis. There was still consistent leadership on those wards, etc. So it does show you a true level, and what we would feel could be then, compared to how we're preventing deconditioning, that there's less pressure areas occurring in our care. Now, Debbie, do you want to step in here and explain the period of time during August and September?
Absolutely. So I wanted to explain the fact that the data between February and July is when the ward-led enablement programme is on Darcy Ward. And as with many great ideas, initiatives up and down the country, we are at the mercy of short-term funding pots, as I'm sure many other schemes and wonderful things that happen across NHS and health and social care are. So the Darcy Ward was the second ward that was added. It was only added for a period of time of 6 months. So we've been able to take this as part of our development and learning to look at the months prior and the months after to see if the intervention did actually have an impact. So August and September, the programme was not on Darcy Ward in that time. And what you can see there is that from a very low 2 per month as an average and 1 month with 0, in that 2 months that the system was that WLE was not in that ward, it actually went to an average of 6 per month of required reports of pressure area care, and 2 of those were actually category 3 within that 2 months. We have been very fortunate to be able to secure another one of those wonderful short-term funding pots, and WLE did restart back onto the Darcy ward in October. And as you can see, the trend has started to reduce once again, but we will be keeping an eye on it, as we do believe this has a direct correlation with the up and out of audits.
Now, what we want to do is take some really important, not only the patient stories, which are very powerful to promote what we're trying to do, but also what are the clinicians feeling. And they were basically just asked one question, is again to mitigate bias, to mitigate any other factors. And one of our senior clinicians reported how they thought WLE program had been a massive success. It's been so refreshing to have an initiative introduced that makes so much sense, and that's sort of double barrel, but they understood the importance, and again having that buy-in from the medical teams alone to understand that actually activity complements the recovery is really, really important. They thought the team were lovely, very hardworking, and you could argue that I'm slightly biased for this. When I got to visit the ward environment, they're always on their toes, always working, they're always with patients. There's not one point in time that you see the team, engrossed, unfortunately, with a lot of us healthcare staff, which we have bound by so much paperwork as such. Yes, they have their documentation and the legalities that surround that, but you can see that actually their ring-fence nature and how protected they are in their role enables them to be really face-to-face with the patient a lot of the time. So it's also the element which we didn't, unfortunately, again, this is a reflection on the service, that as we all battle and try to strive for this 7-day service in the NHS to support all the care that we can to our patients, the ward-led enablement program does work 7 days a week. And that, again, is a big noticeable factor, especially with our consultants when they're coming back on Monday morning to review their plans and actually notice that their patients are better. They are moving more, and therefore those, potentially failed discharges that are set up for that earlier the next week don't happen, and we have more flow. So it's really, really recognised by our clinicians, and they're also embodying it, and even more importantly, referring patients at board round and during times that we would not have necessarily seen beforehand.
So that bridge that we talked about right back at the very beginning, the very first concept, the idea of could reablement actually bridge that gap between hospital and home? Could they actually do the community reablement ethos in the hospital? The answer to that is yes. But we've also tracked how that then works as a patient comes home into the reablement service. And one of the things that we have been able to demonstrate is that our staff, you may have seen them in some of the videos and the photos earlier, wear a red uniform. Our red uniform is on the ward with the individual, supporting that person in the skills they require to maintain their skills whilst in hospital or improve. And that red uniform also meets them at their home when they go home. It helps to build up that trust. It helps to think, I can do it on the ward with these people in red. I can now do it in my home. And it helps them to keep that air of confidence going and working on their reablement goals as a seamless service. One of the benefits of this is, I'm sure many of you will know, up and down the country, there's often a failed discharge as somebody leaves hospital. We've looked at this. We've compared the data between those that have gone through the WLE programme compared to those from hospital that haven't. And that's actually been a 5% reduction in those that did not leave hospital at the time they were expected to. Also, we've been looking at the reablement length of stay. So in the community, people stay within the service for a period of time, hopefully no longer than 6 weeks. But we've been looking at that, comparing the WLE cohort of individuals compared to those that have come from hospital, gone through the same journey in the community, but did not have the ward-led enablement programme intervention. And the length of stay for those that went through WLE is significantly shorter than those who were not receiving that in hospital. It is now sitting at just over 22 days in the community before they are leaving the service, compared to 27 for those that do not have ward-led enablement. When you look at this in the amount of starts per week that can provide into our service alone, our little service in the north east of Essex, that's 6 extra starts per week, which if you looked at over a whole year, you've got an extra 268 people that can actually go through a reablement service. That's quite a significant impact for the length of stay. One of the other factors that we compare are measured against is our self-caring outcomes. So individuals that have been through the ward-led enablement programme and had that early intervention reablement whilst in hospital are more likely to close their service self-caring with no reliance on the social care system than those who did not have that early intervention reablement whilst in hospital. And again, bringing this back down to some numbers, a return on investment for the community reablement, for every pound spent on the service for those individuals that have gone through ward-led enablement, it is actually a social care saving of nearly £6 compared to those that don't have the ward-led enablement programme, which is only at £5.16. So, Roy, you've met him already. What I'd like to do now is actually to let Roy have the last word of our presentation to you today. Roy is now 1 year on from his reablement stay within the community, and more than 1 year on now from when he had his ward-led enablement programme within Colchester Hospital. And I think it's only right that because he was our first customer, he gets to have the last say today.
Well, when hospital, I could do nothing at all. I was in a wheelchair, using the commode, using a perching stool when I could get into the bathroom, and I was totally disabled. When I came back home, your Essex care girls used to come in the morning, supposedly to wash me and whatever, but what I wanted them to do was help me to walk with my frame, stand by me while I was walking, just in case I fell, and that's what they did. And we slowly increased it over the weeks that they were coming. The distance I was walking, the amount I was walking, then standing, and I went through there. Now I'm walking normally, doing everything around the house that I would normally do. My sport was always cycling, and I'm back on the bike. I can ride 30 miles quite comfortably, thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah, I've improved 100% from being totally disabled to nearly normal. Yeah, it's been good. And then all thanks to Chloe and the girls to walk the length of the bed. And then when I came up and down,
Although Debbie said that Roy was going to have the last word, unfortunately, I will chip in slightly. If there was any issues there with the quality of the stream, we will be ensuring those links are forwarded on. And I cannot stress to you how powerful that video is really, and also to see Roy 1 year on. The only thing I will contest is that obviously he should have been wearing a helmet when cycling off like that for the video stream. We have noted that, and don't you worry, we have advised that for future. But I'd just like to say thank you for everyone for the time today. I know we're slightly overrun on the presentation, but please, we welcome any questions. Debbie and I are very open. Please reach out to us by email if there's anything further we can elaborate on. Again, we're still very much learning every day with this program of work, but I think also that's the beauty of it, to make sure that we are adapting the service to the best it possibly can be to the patients that we're supporting. So thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Debbie. A personal thank you to Debbie, who's put a lot of this together and worked very hard over many evenings of late to do so. So thank you very much.
Well done,
Debbie
and Josh. Thanks for sharing all that. Your presentation is phenomenal, and I think I can vouch for your ladies in red. We've been on the ward in Colchester, and everyone is out of bed and everyone is eager to with their enablement program and to go home. And I see Jamie actually was there, Stamp was there with us. So what we'll do is we'll if we go and move to the chat, if there's any questions from the chat, and I see there is a hand up already that we can ask questions.
So there's a couple in the chat. So one might ask is Suzanne, I think Josh covered a couple of your questions. We'll do the one from the chat and then we'll come to the hands up. So is it possible if I come to you, Suzanne, to get the ones Josh didn't manage to cover?
Yeah, thank you. To be honest, I think the main one was really, it was of a particular type of ward that this was done on. I mean, essentially, it doesn't really matter because I can imagine it would just work anywhere. But it's just helpful to know if it's post-surgical patients, because I think there's a bit of a different ethos sometimes on those types of wards anyway. So just out of curiosity more than anything. But thank you all very much for your time. It sounds really interesting, and I really love how much you've really scrutinized what you've done and the data to really show that, you know, you're not just making it up. Not that anybody would suggest that you are, but you know what I mean. You've really looked at so many outcomes and really looked at, has it really made a difference? And it sounds great.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, no, so the ward was a general medical ward for older peoples. I completely concur with you that, you know, surgical ward, the enhanced recovery protocol should be more or less ingrained. And you do get a lot of consultant leadership with that, which is fantastic, and with orthopedics. But yeah, we've extrapolated that model but into older general medicine. But we'd also consider this would be acute younger medicine wards as well. So it's very much, I think, a lot of history of how these areas operate as such. But like I say, it is important, and the things that we found is that there are behaviours that we have to tap into as well. So there's certainly a particular type of people. You know, we're very fortunate with the ward sisters that we have on these wards. They are very innovative. They are very proactive in terms of motivating, moving forwards. They're visible leaders. We had support from the matrons, but also it's how we managed expectations prior to starting the event as well. So we did workshops. We came and met the staff. We brought the, as Roy said, Essex girls, not the stereotypical Essex girls, into the ward to meet staff, to understand what it was like. And, you know, we do get the cultural question asked, like, how did it work? And I think the training, education, expectations, of course, but there is also natural behavioural traits that we found very fortunate in the people that we're working with, and it just hit the ground running.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I think there might be another bit, Suzanne, I think around some of the therapy stuff that we'll sort of come back to a bit later. I'll go through the other ones with Nadia, and then we'll sort of come right round if that's all right. Nadia.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of, I just feel like, obviously this is something that we'd love to implement kind of on our wards and stuff. But it just feels like in terms of the barriers to implementing this, obviously staffing is one that everyone's going to face. And I think having your own like ward-led enablers is great. But I feel like from our side, therapy will be the ones who are starting this. And it's it feels difficult because a lot of the time, a lot of the responsibility does feel like it's on OTs and physios. And so kind of my question is, it feels like a lot of the change that is needed is in regards to the culture and involving the nursing staff in doing some of the enabling. And so kind of from your side of things, is there anything you found helpful in terms of changing the culture of whose responsibility it is in terms of doing this deconditioning with the patients?
Debbie, you look like you're poised. Do you want to answer, and then I'll add anything in?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. When you look at it from the NHS side, I'm very fortunate the fact that we are owned by Essex County Council. So I'm from more the social care side and look at it from the community reablement element. And what we did through the learning and the testing of our original concept was actually ring fence these staff to only work on ward-led enablement. They are actually community-based workers. They work for ourselves, our reablement service. They do not actually work for the NHS. They are individuals who have honorary contracts within the NHS to enable them to work on the wards and to work with the patients, but they have a ring-fenced focus of purely ward-led enablement and do not get involved in anything else that the ward staff do. So they have a very clear remit. There is some very clear boundaries, and one of the things that has actually helped here is I in essence have provided an extra 3 pair of hands to the ward that are surplus to the requirements excuse me, that the ward would normally have. This has brought the focus but also the culture. We've been able to get everybody to see that it is not just for therapists to get people moving and walking. We work closely with the therapists. We work on the therapy plans. We make sure that individuals are excuse me, the individuals are actually fit to be able to mobilise and move, but it's started to bring a culture about the fact that other staff can get people up and moving, that nurses can get people into the chairs, not just a therapist. We actually did a midpoint questionnaire with the ward staff, and actually reablement was resoundingly everybody's business when it came out as the results of that questionnaire, that everybody understood that anybody can move and do things. They do it at home. So we have helped, I think, by having a model that changed the ethos of the ward by bringing community staff with that community risk-based approach reablement into the ethos of the wards. Josh?
So yeah, just to build on that, Nadia, I think it'd be a good conversation to have off call as well, because I appreciate there's other questions, because there's so many arms to it. You could go down to the nursing curriculum, the future nursing standards, how it doesn't identify mobility as one of those movements forwards. Our nursing college, bless them, they have such an intense job that they're working very much in a more medical setting than it was, say, what Florence Nightingale was talking about as an example. But we still do have that culture at times. If it's PTOT's role to identify that, but it's the education around that. It's the reframing of what reablement is. It's probably taking away that term rehab in an acute hospital now. Term baseline, which we should all hopefully turn our noses up to nowadays when patients come into hospital, etc. So it's about reframing it. It's about creating that environment, that ethos, but there are a lot of arms to it. But again, it does also come down to the modern nursing leadership that we've had on these wards and how they're like, no, this is our job, including in the handovers. It's board round discussions. It's the healthcare assistants are supernumerary or working alongside the therapists. So we're skill mixing as well. Our therapists, conversely, were feeling a bit, they are treading on our toes a bit, but actually that died down quite simply and found, this is just a welcomed additional resource that are protected to do the things, to protect and to enable the patients that we can't be seeing day by day and keeping them strong so they don't decondition. But there's a lot more to it, Nadia, but I think it's a great question and one we're definitely asked about quite a lot.
Thank you. Michelle.
Yeah, hi. I think it's fantastic. I'm the registered manager and head of service for enablement in London Borough of Lewisham. We work really closely in terms of all the things you do, Debbie, but obviously we do it after they've left. There's issues, of course, about, even though we work really closely with our trust colleagues, there's always issues about the information, the goals start later. So I think this is fantastic. But my question really is about the medication. The medication element of the kind of independence is always an issue for us, because often, again, people came out with what they went in with. They've got a fighting chance to be able to manage that. Unfortunately, as we know, the old green bag comes out and then it's dumped there, and our first call is with our enablement officers, and it's, oh my God, and then it becomes a level 3 and all that. So really the question is about, did you consider medication, and did you consider any way of kind of self-managing with the client or the patient prior to them being discharged? Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think one of the key messages here, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's the community staff that have come into the hospital to deliver the reablement ethos. We do not get involved in the medication rounds on the ward. That's a nursing role whilst they are in hospital. We have very clear boundaries as to what our staff can and can't do. So although, yes, you're absolutely right, in our community, in our home services, we do support individuals to become independent with their own medication administration. In hospital, we do not get involved in that. But what we do is find out what do they do at home themselves. And that information is cascaded out across the ward. Our staff are on the board rounds. So our staff are an active part of that board round and are often asked, what do you know about the patient? Because we spend time with them, we work with them, we are talking about what is your home like? How do you cope at home? You're going to have to learn to cope again when you go home. And this is what we do. So we bring that community risk approach into the hospital, and that does include communicating this person self-medicates at home, they can self-medicate here, and all they get given is the medication at the right time of day rather than being administered. So often what will happen is when we are planning discharge, that sort of thing is written onto that discharge paperwork now, where it's the goals, what they can do for themselves, what they did before in their own home, because we've learnt a lot in the couple of days that we work with someone, and then that goes home with them on their discharge, no matter which pathway they're going down.
Can I just build on that? Is that all right? But I think there's another element to this, and it's a great question, Michelle, so thank you very much. But it's that, what Debbie said as well, is that subjective history and that consistency in knowing what the patient is actually doing in the community. We all strive for it, but we all know the boundless amounts of paperwork or electronic documentation we have to try and find those really important elements. You know, some people might even agree with me, and I know a lot of our therapists, having a key to get access to the home on discharge and how many times that discharge fails as a result of just purely access. But this is what pulls that all together. ESNEFT as a trust is moving to one singular EPR in the next coming years. So that's going to help, of course, but I think what is only is actually having factual information. It's all in nice guidance around frailty care, around falls, around everything, around cognition. So what they're actually doing without realizing is directly pulling in that consistency in subjective history or information or social history of our patients, that therefore also will conversely mitigate those failed discharges as well. But I know it's not specifically about medications, but that whole understanding of what they're actually physically doing is so important. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got about 5 more minutes for questions before we sort of wrap up. Jamie.
I'll be very quick. Hi, Debbie and Josh. Nice to see you both again.
Hi.
Hi, Jamie.
Visit Colchester. Hiya. And I can't say enough about how fantastic it is, and the presentation was brilliant. I'm hoping if we can access it, I can start to push this through our executive levels as well, because I think it's really important that they see what we've seen today. Just a very quick question. We struggle to get length of stay data for individual wards because we capture data from the point of admission. Therefore, there are transfers for some of these patients as they move through the hospital. How do you manage to work a way around that? Because we could do it on the ward against patient names, but we haven't got any historical data to kind of show the trends that would back up that sort of graph that you have. But how do you do that?
I suppose we're quite fortunate. Although we do have multiple EPR systems in place, but the ward clerks have been central to this, I suppose, in how they update our care flow system. As an example, when that patient moves off and transfers, then our BI team can collate that information. It's difficult for me to formally answer that. I might, Jamie, actually take this offline and perhaps get you involved, or set up a conversation with our digital logistics teams, etc., to see what we could potentially look at, if there's any form of even robotic process automation type process that could work. But I think in long and short, we're very fortunate to have some level of systems in place that do track that fairly accurately, and length of stay has been tracked for several years here, also based on our red to green data as well, etc., and things like that. So I think it's quite historical, but let me link you in with colleagues here and see what else we can help with.
Perfect, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Last couple of questions, Emma.
Hi, I just wondered, has anybody heard of the days kept away from home quality improvement? It talks about a lot of the stuff that you're doing at the moment about deconditioning, reablement, getting patients back like home first rather than prolonging hospital stays, and that's NCA wide. So it's been done at Oldenbury, Rochdale, and we've had like similar results and similar things. So it might be something that you might want to involve yourself on that one, because it seems like we're both doing a lot of the same work for the same outcome.
Amazing.
Somebody mentioned about how did they get the nurses to do the work and the difference between the therapists and the nursing. So what I did for my ward, because we were part of it, is we tagged it onto something that they were already doing. And then we worked everything with the physio. So we created mobility boards. So when they did a physio assessment, it was if they didn't find they had the time to communicate that directly with the nurses were already aware because it was on the back of the bed board. Yeah. And then it kind of just flowed better. Like we reduced inappropriate referrals, and we've also managed to get patients home first rather than to short-term placements or IMCs. We haven't had the same resources that you have, so like we haven't managed to have extra staff or anything to facilitate it. So if you could tell me how you did that, that would be amazing. But we have managed to reduce the stay massively, so it might just be a good like comparison maybe.
Amazing. No, like I say, there's significant overlap there, but like I say, appreciate with time, let's get a meeting in or catch up another time in the next couple of weeks and see where the overlap is here, because what we want to see as well is what a model would look like. You know, if we were to, you know, take this across the country like where you're working, what are the key themes here? What are the key metrics? What are the key elements that really could develop even like a standard operating procedure, for example, or a framework, sorry, not a competency framework, but a framework that could be enabling other areas to do similar to what we're doing. But I agree with you on that home first ethos. In fact, I learned a lot through the ECIST program, work the Alliance 16 program, and also reducing also risk aversion. So a lot of that training that you're probably doing is actually what we've done with the staff before here as well to help manage those expectations first. So brilliant, amazing work. But yeah, let's link up.
I think they're in the processes of that kind of stuff, so now might be the right time for you to jib in.
Fantastic. Thanks for raising that, Emma. We might be in touch after this because it'd be great to get another lunch and learn session to talk about that different approach as well. And then we sort of compare notes. So that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Rare times, we can be as quick as possible. Try and fit in the last two questions. Caitlin and then Karen.
Hello there, sorry, yeah, it's Zoe Bradley actually. I'm logged in on my daughter's laptop. So I'm at Leicester ITU actually, so this is kind of post my involvement. So I work as the Rehab Link sister on the unit, amongst other things. And what I'm finding quite interesting, this is a medical ward base, so it's more a comment really and I think sort of I would definitely take some of this information back. We do quite a lot on the ITU in terms of getting people moving, getting people up out of bed, especially sort of trachea patients on filters. So, but what I do find is then there's a disconnect then going onto the ward. So it's quite exciting to see that there is a programme out there that's working, that might be worth me having some conversations with people about how. I know we've got a new physio in post actually for our medical ward who's kind of looking at implementing some of these things as well. So yeah, it was more a comment, but no, it's really exciting and it's lovely to see that there's proof in the pudding. I know we've definitely seen it on ITU as we've implemented more strategies. So yeah, so thank you for your work. It looks amazing.
My professional background is critical care, so I would love to be that early on. Obviously they are generally acutely unwell patients. They certainly meet the criteria to reside, as it were. They definitely can't be sent home, but there is definitely something there that could work. But yeah, let's have a conversation as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Brilliant. We've come to the final question. I'm aware there's a couple in the chat box. We'll try and do our best to get those answered after 1 o'clock. So we can let you all go. So Karen.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Karen Culver, Director of Nursing over at Oldham Care Organisation, which is part of the NCA. And Emma, who's just obviously shared the DCAF work, obviously works alongside myself. So Emma and her team and various teams have done some amazing work, which obviously we've not got enough time to go into. But one of the things that I'm just doing at the minute is we've revamped the ward boards in order to do effective board rounds. So we're expecting our boards to be delivered for the medical areas at the end of January, and we've obviously designed them ourselves with some ECIST colleagues. So we've got champions from a medical and nursing to actually concentrate on board rounds to support the DCAF and make obviously business as usual So I think it'd be really good if we could obviously catch up and just obviously share ideas, etc., because we are doing an awful lot within the NCA, and there's some great work that the ward teams have just embraced. It's really great. It's really fabulous to see. So shout out to Emma.
Sorry, Lee, can I just add, I just think it's fantastic, and this has come back to that question I think Nadia brought up as well, and it's just having an overall MDT ethos that this is business as usual, and your position as Director of Nursing is so powerful, and we've been very supportive from our colleagues here at ESNET as well for that, and driving it. And you know, it's when you look at that change model, you know, we've also adapted a lot from the Leads model and what they've done in terms of continuous improvement and how we can embed change managers as well. So yeah, very grateful, be really happy, and really look forward to meeting up.
I do apologise as well, my camera's not working, that's why I've not got it on. So
no problem at all.
No worries at all. Brilliant, thank you. So there's a couple more questions, but we'll try and get, I think we're running out of time, so just hand back over to Emma to Emily to close up.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for everyone for attending, but particularly thanks to Debbie and Josh for sharing what they've done. I think you can tell from all the questions that you've really inspired people, and there's a lot of networking I think that we could do from this. So on that point, this has been recorded, so will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, but we can share slides afterwards, and as Lee said, we'll try and respond to some of the questions in the chat that we haven't been able to go through.